How's it going, my confident bakers? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're making salted peanut blondies. So let's get in the kitchen and see how it's done. A blondie is basically a white chocolate version of a chocolate brownie. But it's not as simple as swapping dark chocolate for white chocolate. White chocolate is way too sweet. It doesn't have much flavor. In this video, I will show you a few tricks for balancing the flavor and improving it. I will show you how to create a delicious treat that you won't be able to get enough of. So let's get right to it. Let me show you how it's done. Starting with the ingredients. We'll need some white chocolate, light brown sugar, eggs, flour, butter, salted peanuts, dried cranberries, which are optional, some vanilla paste, and some salt. We will offset the sweetness of the white chocolate with saltiness and caramelized flavors. The cranberries are there for a little bit of tartness, which also helps, but you can certainly leave them out if you want. As for the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, spatula, a whisk. We'll need a small pan for browning the butter, and we'll need the tray for baking. I'm using my Lloyd's Pans pizza pan. I've used this for countless sweet bakes. In fact, I've used it more for sweet baking than for pizzas. My blondies turned out pretty thick, so you could easily use a tray with a larger footprint. Just be aware that you'll need to reduce the baking time a little bit. To prevent the batter from sticking to the tray, we need to line it with some paper. A friend showed me a neat little trick for this. Cut the paper so it's slightly larger than your tray. Then turn the tray upside down, place the paper on top of it, and trace the edges and corners using your fingers. Make the edges nice and sharp, and fold the corners over. Then turn the tray right way up again, and the paper should fit right in. I love little nifty tricks like this. It works perfectly. Right, while we're here, let's begin by baking the chocolate. This is one of the methods that we'll use for changing the flavor. We'll bake it in the oven at 140 degrees Celsius, 285 Fahrenheit, for 20 minutes until it gets a light brown color. Whilst the chocolate is baking, we can prepare the other elements. Whole peanuts are a little bit too chunky for this recipe, so pour them in a bowl and bash them up with a rolling pin. You don't need to grind them to a powder, just smash them up roughly. And of course, if you want, you can use any type of other salted nut. But keep it salted, because that helps with balancing the flavor. And speaking of balancing the flavor, here's the next technique that we'll use. We will be browning the butter. Place the butter in a small pan and leave it to melt on medium to high heat. Once it starts bubbling, stir it and move it around so it doesn't sputter too much and make a mess. Butter contains water, and at the moment the water is at the bottom of the pot, whilst the fat is floating on top. In order for us to be able to brown the milk solids, we must let the water evaporate. This will take around 8 to 10 minutes. Keep an eye on the bubbling butter. At first the bubbles will be large, but as the water evaporates, they'll become smaller and smaller. The milk solids will start browning only once the bubbles become really tiny. And from that point on, you only want to leave the butter on the heat for another 30 seconds or so. This is exactly how it should look. The bubbles become really small, almost looking like foam. Put your nose closer to the pot and smell it. Once it starts smelling toasty, take it off the heat immediately. It is quite easy to burn it. If you enjoyed this process, you might be interested in my chocolate cookie recipe, which also used brown butter. Okay, moving on, pour the butter in a large bowl. Add the salt and the vanilla to it, and give it a quick mix. We want the butter and the chocolate to be ready at the same time. I put the chocolate in the oven about 10 minutes before I started making the butter, and it's about ready to come out now. And this is what it should look like. Pour the chocolate into the butter. It should slide off the paper just fine. Once you've added the chocolate, grab your whisk and whisk this mix until it's smooth. Leave it on the side, then take another bowl and move on to making the second part of this blondie batter. Combine the light brown sugar and the eggs. Whisk until smooth. You want to try and melt the sugar, more or less. When it comes to the choice of sugar, you could certainly use some other type, or mix. I think the light brown is nice and subtle, and it works well with the roasted flavors. Okay, now pour the egg and sugar mix into the white chocolate, butter, salt and vanilla mix. Add the cranberries or some other dried fruit if you wish. Or don't add anything, it's up to you. Give it a good whisking once more, and then add the final ingredient, which is the flour. And then, you guessed it, whisk again. I know there's a lot of whisking involved in this recipe, but it's not that difficult. We're not trying to whip anything. The only goal is to mix the batter until it's smooth, so it won't take you too much energy. But if you can't be bothered with whisking and you want a mixer, then go ahead and use it. Alright, we're almost ready to bake this thing. Pour the batter in the paper-lined baking tray. I placed a new piece of paper in my tray because I realized it wasn't quite large enough. You don't need to change the paper. You can use the same paper that you baked the chocolate on. Okay, last but not least, sprinkle the crushed salted peanuts evenly all over the surface of the batter. You can also press them in gently using the palm of your hand. Right, this bad boy is ready for the oven. We'll bake it at 170 degrees Celsius, 340 Fahrenheit for 35 minutes. If your oven doesn't have a fan, bake it at 190 Celsius, 375 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you are baking your blondie in a larger tray and it's a bit thinner, reduce the baking time by 5 minutes perhaps. Once it has nicely puffed up and browned all over, it's ready. So leave it to cool down at room temperature and then move it to the fridge and cool it down until it's completely set. I always bake these things in the afternoon and I leave them in the fridge overnight. And there you have it. That's how you make a salted peanut blondie. Clearly a blondie is quite different from a brownie, and it's not just in the chocolate. It took a couple of techniques and special ingredients to make this work. But it is still quite an effortless bake. It wasn't more than an hour from the time that I put the chocolate in the oven to the time that the blondie came out the oven. Of course we had to wait for it to cool down, but I don't count such things because I plan ahead. These things are very rich. I know I always cut them in big chunks in the video, but I would not suggest you do the same. 100 grams of this is close to 700 calories, and the piece that I'm holding in my hands right now is probably more than that. The reason why I cut them chunky is for the video. To me it just looks more impressive when it's big like that, and it also looks better in the thumbnail pictures. But at the end of the day, it is up to you. But whenever I eat a chunk of brownie like this, I go for a long walk afterwards, and sometimes I skip a meal. Let me know what you think of this recipe in the comments below. And if you're not into blondies, check out my brownie recipe. You'll find it in the pastry, cakes and sweet bakes playlist. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.